Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us again for FCI Live, our June 2023 series. This is our second day, and this runs for all of this week and all of next week, so we hope to see you in more of the sessions. Today, you're here for the session So You Think You Can Co-op with Bonnie Hudspeth and Johan Matthews, and I'm going to turn it over to them in just a minute. First, I just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. Please do mute if you are not speaking, if you're not a presenter, just to prevent sound quality issues, as we are recording. So, and the number one question I always get about FCI Live always is, where is this being recorded? Where can I get the recordings? Every session is being recorded. The videos from these sessions will all be put up the afternoon. Don't pin me to the morning, but the afternoon of Monday, July 3rd. And we will have those up. And then what we'll do is we'll email absolutely anyone and everyone who registered for any of our sessions. You will get an email that afternoon showing you exactly where you can find all the videos. So we absolutely are recording. Please do stay muted unless the speakers otherwise invite you to unmute. And I'm going to turn over to them in just a second here, and they'll let you know if they want to take Q&A throughout or at the end and how they want to do that. Real quick, I just want to thank our champion level sponsor for FCI Live. We were very excited. We have a lot of sponsors this time in the series, but our champion sponsor is National Co-op Grocers. Thanks to them for making the series possible. All right, and with that, we are very lucky to have with us today Bonnie Hudspeth with Firebrand Cooperative and Johan Matthews from Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. I'm going to get that right. I keep trying to use your old name. And Bonnie also happens to serve as the board president of the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. And they're here to share with us about some really basic but intrinsic, important, interesting concepts about what it means to choose to be a cooperative and why do it, why organize as a cooperative. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome Bonnie and Johan. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, JQ. And, Johan and I were kicking around a title for this session, and he came up with this playful one. I don't know if anyone's watched So You Think You Can Dance. I have not, but I know there's celebrities, there's judges, and you might be here thinking you can co-op, but what does it actually mean? Like, what does a co-op mean? What does it take to organize it? How do you know if you're a co-op or not? We kind of want to kick it around and get your input, and at the end we could even have a community panel of judges. So that's kind of what we're going to do. The plan for today is to, Johan and I will introduce ourselves briefly. We're going to do a community builder involving you all, so a little bit of interaction, and then we're going to dive into, well, what is a co-op? And I'm going to talk about food co-ops specifically, but kind of the international cooperative movement. What does that mean? And then Johan's going to share some stories of emerging co-ops in the food system. So not food co-ops, but the principles of cooperation in inspirational active use right now. And then at the end, we're going to have a closeout and reflection with community judges. So be prepared. All right, so quick intros. I've been involved in the food co-op movement for a while, starting out as a child, doing peanut butter packing at the local food co-op in the community I grew up in. Then I went on to organize and do pre-operational development and to open a food co-op in Keene, New Hampshire. And then I went on to work for an association of 40-ish food co-ops around the Northeast, including about a dozen of those being startups, for over 12 years. And as JQ mentioned before, I also serve as board president of Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, and we fund food co-ops, helping them emerge and expand. And I also work as an independent consultant with a worker cooperative, Firebrand. And I'll turn it over to Johan to introduce himself.
Peace, everybody. Johan Matthews. Today I'm going to be sharing from a variety of perspectives from my own company, Mutual Design, co-design company. We work with institutions and communities to help them create and collaboratively create solutions to problems they're facing, or how do you have a community design its own park, right? I also am going to be bringing some experiences during my time working with Black Farmer Fund. They had a pilot community in 2021 of Black farmers throughout New York State who were re-engaging their relationship with the land and really thinking about how do we reimagine the food system and how do we feed our people. And lastly, the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, where I really diving deep into the idea of cooperative enterprise. My role there is to facilitate the creation and the growth of cooperative enterprise, specifically in emerging communities across the Northeast. So that's how I think about this activity, right? My interest for the last 10 plus years has been facilitating equitable change in emerging communities. How do we help people who are working together in their communities to solve problems through enterprise? And so I see it, as an important toolkit, and I try to really engage this toolkit within the context that we're trying to deal with, right? Trying to bring it from the bottom up and not from the top down. So I'll share a little bit about that. And I'll turn it, actually, before I turn it back, let's turn it over to you guys. So we have a community builder in the chat or coming off mute. I'd like to invite you to tell us about a time where you chose to solve a personal problem by working together with members of your community. All right, so drop it in the chat. I'll read off a few of them and we can ask, is it a co-op? And we'll also see if anyone's bold enough to come off mute and share a little bit about that issue, right? And I can share a little bit. I'll go first. So I've been an aspiring chocolatier for many years, wanted to get into chocolate, love chocolate, and I've been kind of dragging my feet. But I found a community of growers, chocolatiers, and other folks who are thinking about this, right? So some people are growing, some people are making, and some of us are trying to imagine how to reimagine the chocolate system. So am I a part of a co-op, right? This community of people, different stages, different activities. What are we, right? So let's leave it in the air. One of you guys, drop it in the chat or come off mute.
I would say for me, hi, I'm Deanne Washington in Arizona, and I'm representing the Phoenix Food Co-op. And for me, I would say identifying a local food system that's efficient and supportive of BIPOC farmers in Phoenix was a desire and a problem that I saw a need for. And so did a lot of other like-minded individuals. And so we formulated the Phoenix Food Co-op. I take no credit for starting it, but I do sit as the vice president on the co-op, and thank you for having us today.
No problem, Dion. So is Dion a part of a co-op in Phoenix, right? They've got a problem, right? That I heard a little bit about when I hear more. They've got members, right? So the particular community expressed, and they've got an organization, or they're trying to organize. I'm not sure where they are in their stages. So are they a co-op, right? These are the questions I ask, right? Appreciate you, Dion. Anyone else? And feel free to judge in the chat if you think about this question as well. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple examples. Sherry shared that when they were diagnosed with cancer, asked for support and appreciated the support of community to get to chemo, other appointments, offer food, love, and other help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we had a problem again, right? A dear one, loved one who's dealing with an illness, right? We have a community, right? That loved one's peoples. And what was the vehicle that they used to deliver that value, right? So thinking about that, was Sherry a part of a co-op? We've got more. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yeah. Kay Gibson, I apologize, I don't know what your name is. Let's just call you Kay Gibson. Kay Gibson was assigned to open an art gallery in a city-owned space. They knew nothing about galleries or art for that matter, so they reached out to artists and event folks who helped them open Stone Soup Gallery that still exists in City Hall space.
Wow. Very interesting, right? I got a problem. I got to open an art store. Who shares this problem? Is there a community? And what is the vehicle? It still exists to this day. So that's the theme I'm going to try to reintroduce to us, right? This problem, this community, this vehicle, this organization. So let's keep going. I don't know if there's one more. There's one more. Then we can
Yeah. This is a common problem for anyone who writes. Writer's block, right? Joanna has writer's block and is working with other local artists and writers to bounce ideas off of and help write songs.
Excellent, excellent. And we're getting a few more in, right? The
Yeah.
same idea. That personal problem of writing block, as Bonnie said, is definitely a thing. And working together with a community, self-defined writers, and we're going to bounce ideas off, right? What are we going to do? Monthly class, we're going to create a company. Are we a co-op, right? I think I saw someone come off mute. Want to invite anyone to maybe share a little bit about what they think of some of these ideas, and then we can dive into some of the content. I'm not sure if it was intentional, actually, but Carrie, you came off mute.
With a really cute cat.
Exactly. That's what caught my eye, you know.
Yeah.
And
Maybe we can circle back and just as we're going, throw questions in the chat, please, because if we have time as we're going through, we want to take time to address those questions, and if not in the end, or we can follow up with you after. So throw questions in the chat as they arise, or ideas, or applause for each other. I love all the love I'm seeing here in response to a cooperative problem solving going on.
Absolutely. So take a look at those stories and see, is it a co-op? Think about it, and we'll revisit that at the end. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie to drive into some of the more technical aspects of what we're thinking and talking about here.
Thanks, Johan. So yeah, let's get technical for a minute. And, you know, when we think about what is a cooperative, well, we're lucky in that there's already an international body that has defined a cooperative. So there's millions of people across the world that meet unmet needs collectively through using the cooperative model. And so the ICA, or International Cooperative Alliance, defines a cooperative as an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their own needs, their common economic, social, cultural needs and aspirations. How do they do it? They do it through jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. That is so dense. That is so technical. But I want to hear from you all, either in the chat or someone on mute. How would you explain what a co-op is to my 5-year-old? She just graduated from kindergarten, super proud. How would you explain what a co-op is to her? Because she's not going to understand any of that stuff. How do we simplify that? How do we get the co-op model to resonate? Anyone?
Hi.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi, Bonnie. I would say we all work together to have something good happen. You know, it could be food if we want a food co-op, it could be art if we want an art co-op, but it's everybody works together and we support each other to make it happen.
Amazing. Thank you, Sherry. I love it. And she would understand that. She would totally understand that. And Alana says, cooperation and working with friends and family to get things they need. Super simple, straight to the point. That gets you excited, right? Working with the people you love to get the things you need. Anyone else?
Bonnie, I just want to challenge you. You must have had to answer that question with the work you do. How did you explain it?
You know, I actually, my closest explanation, Stuart, is similar to what Alana said, which is kind of come together with your neighbors. I kind of use the neighbor frame, right? Friends and neighbors, you might not know them. They might not be friends yet. Come together with your community, work together to meet a need, a shared need. That's kind of how I described it. And I'm saying, thank you for that question. And then I'm also seeing Victoria said, the community owns and decides what happens. And Jason added, all of your friends come together to have the same thing together. Like they want chocolate milk. So we all come together to try to find and get chocolate milk. Yes, my 5-year-old will love that. And Bernadine says, organization formed and owned by those same people. Form it, you own it. Absolutely. Okay, this is awesome. Next time my 5-year-old asks me why, or what is a co-op? I'm gonna kick it back to you all. Great. So that's kind of the basic definition. And then cooperative principles are, you know, in contrast to the sole goal of maximizing profit for shareholders, the cooperative movement has different priorities, right? And we still need profit, right? We got to make surplus. I would call it surplus over profit. And what do you do with that surplus? It's still important for the success of your business, but it's not the end goal, right? It's not generating money as the end goal. It's meeting a need, a shared need. It's the means to an end rather than the end itself. And so co-ops around the world operate according to these same international cooperative principles. You all know them, right? Voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation. That means everyone has a member vote, autonomy and independence, access to training, education, and information, and prioritizing that, working together with other co-ops to transform your local community, and then having a concern for the community. And something I want to pose as a question, Johan and I were talking about this as we were sharing our own experience with how we describe co-ops, is there might be other principles in your community that your community shares and that unite and guide your community, such as the principles of Kwanzaa, right? There's 7 principles of Kwanzaa. You can see there's overlap, right? There also might be areas where it's kind of conflictual with the guiding co-op principles. So I would just invite, as you think about what brings people together, compare and align, or even contradict these principles to see how do they play? How do they play? How do they build off of each other, add to each other, guide to each other? And in addition to these principles, one of the things that makes cooperatives is values that they share. So cooperators around the world are united and guided by the shared values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, solidarity. And thinking about businesses guided by these values, that's different, right, than your experience. You can feel when you walk into a business where values are put at the front and center about how do we make decisions. And I think the co-ops, that's a constant challenge, is how do we, once we get the doors open, how do we live those values and how we treat people, in how we treat customers, and how we treat staff, and how we treat each other. And then thinking about, okay, well, how is that structured? You all shared really good examples and a bunch of different types of, right? We're going to determine, are these cooperatives, right? But something to notice about how co-ops are structured is like, look at who is at the top. This is one way of representing a co-op structure. But it's not one sole proprietor, right? It's not an individual boss dude. Boss dude is not at the top. The member owners are at the top. Now, for a worker cooperative, the members would be the employees. For a consumer cooperative, right? Like most food co-ops in our country are organized as consumer cooperatives. You can see the consumers at the bottom there. They're also the members. So they're at the bottom and the top, right? So it takes the cooperative structure, the members are the owners, the users, and you can see that flow of responsibility and flow of accountability and flow. It's a totally different business structure that democratizes how we make decisions about what we have access to, right? And it recognizes leadership being different from the beneficiaries. Look at the feedback loop and personality. Another thing that's important to know about co-ops is that they literally are designed to address systems failures. And there's a lot of systems failures, and you all have examples of when systems are failing and there's an unmet need, how do we come together and organize? And the important thing to know too is that to look around your community beyond a food co-op, right, is their co-ops are owned by and accountable to their communities, and they've got a track record of addressing crisis and unmet need when it arrives. And these are some of the factors, the fact that they can build community infrastructure, that they can anchor wealth, and that you can bring people together to work in solidarity to support each other. So I'm going to share a couple of examples of what are some examples of how co-ops the organizing process and what actually happens. So I think something that I didn't realize when I was organizing a food co-op 15 years ago at this point is that co-ops are really built through community organizing and mutual aid. And I know you all are already doing that, or maybe you're just getting started with organizing, but you probably have already started having these questions, right? They're more than just grocery stores, and mutual aid is core to a co-op's purpose. So community organizing and mutual aid really mean being not rooted in charity. What are you rooted in? Solidarity. It's an all of us problem, all of us solution. It's either we need, in food co-ops, it might be we need nutritious food, or we need a voice in what food we have access to. We want to be able to own a business together and anchor it so it does not abandon our community. And one of the best definitions or kind of how does a co-op work comes from Dr. Jessica Gordon-Emhart, who shared, co-ops allow us to be joint architects of our own destinies. That's beautiful, right? We're building it together. And so what does that actually look like? It means that co-ops can allow us to pool resources, small amounts of money, to collectively build businesses that serve all of us, that none of us could do by ourselves. So the average member share of a co-op is around $150, and they have enormous impacts in their community. Annual sales are millions of dollars usually. There are some very small co-ops that are 500,000, but most co-ops, one of the co-ops in our region is $60 million of sales a year. That's multiple stores, right? So those are kind of the range, but it's a much larger collective impact that any of us could have as individuals. So in addition to allowing us to scale our resources together, the focus of food co-ops is really on meeting member need. And so because our co-ops prioritize putting people over profit, that makes all the difference in when needs come out, or when our health is at stake, like right during the pandemic, where we need businesses that are focused on our needs versus lining the pockets of distant shareholders. And it also means that resources are reinvested in the community, or they're returned to members on the basis of their use. So the more you use the business, the more you get back. And examples of that are having cooking classes, right? Members ask, hey, can we have a cooking class? Members notice, hey, we're in an economic recession. I am struggling to afford healthy food. I cannot shop at the co-op right now with my struggles. So Food for All programs, needs-based discounts are put in place to offset the cost of food, right? So that everyone can, making it closer so everyone can shop at the food co-op. So those are just a couple of examples of how the co-ops focus on putting member needs. Another really important thing about cooperatives is the community accountability piece. So I want to see kind of show of hands, who has had a grocery store close kind of overnight in your community, in your lifetime? Put your hand up, right? It's terrible, especially if that's the only place, if you don't have a car, if you don't have the ability to drive, and that's the only place that you and your family were shopping. It also feels like a disrespect and an abandonment. It's like, oh, corporate headquarters decided to close the business overnight. Did they ask the community? No, they didn't. And so by rooting in the community and being collectively owned, they don't leave. They're not going to leave in search of higher profits. They're going to remain a community asset, which means you're going to be accountable to the community. And I think something important when you're in this visioning stage, or maybe you're close to opening your doors, either way, is thinking of this larger interconnected piece. Don't stop at just a grocery store. Get the grocery store open. I'm not saying don't do that. Get your grocery store open. But this larger vision, it's like the capitalist system sucks. It is not serving any of us. It's serving very few wealthy individuals. And so thinking forward to, a lot of cooperative leaders have this the concept of like, how can we share ownership of everything in our community? Wouldn't that be amazing? And Cornelius Blanding, who is a co-op hero of mine, who works with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, he shared at one of NFCA's annual meetings kind of like this concept: what if the residents of communities truly owned the economic base and infrastructure of the communities? What if they own the farms, the land, the processing facilities, the grocery stores? I would add some of the things you did, right? The art centers, the childcare cooperatives, the health rides, whatever it is, right? What if we could make all of the things in our community interconnected and owned collectively? And so, this is visionary. It's challenging to open a co-op. I'm not going to lie, right? Because you're not just doing it with yourself or one other person. You're doing it with at least 3 people, and usually 1,000 founding member owners before you open your doors. So, why would you consider this model? Why is it desirable? Why does it matter, right? It comes down to when you actually look at the impact of food co-ops. National Cooperative Grocers measures this. And the average co-op employs over 100 people. They contribute to staff development. More of the positions are full-time than at conventional grocery stores, right? They create solid jobs for the community. What else? I think a number of you have mentioned food, right? It's in the name, food co-op, but we know control of the food system matters. And so it's up to us. Do we want a place where we can spend our money on food that is building wealth in our community and staying in our community, or extracted from our community and our farmers? Right? Those are cute farmers near the community I live in, Brattleboro, right? It's like they're right there. You know them. You can ask them, hey, I like these kind of mushrooms. Can you grow them? And they might. But the co-op, the average co-op spends over $5 million of local products every year. That's going directly back into the hands of your neighbor farmers and producers. And, 281 of them. A lot of co-ops work with over 281 local farmers and producers. That's substantial. That's extraordinarily higher. I guarantee you. It used to be, the old number was 2%. It was like 2% of products at conventional grocery stores were from local farmers and producers. So it matters where we put our money, right? And in addition to that, what happens in times of crisis? We are in an unstable dumpster fire right now, right? As a society, climate injustice, it's real. And so what do we need? What do we need as businesses that are going to thrive in crisis? Not only survive, but thrive. Co-ops outlive corporations. And a number of studies up in Canada, this is one example, it's an older example, but you can see the co-ops are in green, the other business corporations are in gray. You can see over time, over 10 years, it's 1 year, then 5 years, then 10 years. Over 10 years, the difference in businesses that are still open when they're cooperatively owned increases over time. So they become stable anchors in the community. Okay, so this is easy, right? This sounds delightful. Let's open a food co-op tomorrow, you might be thinking. But JQ's probably already told you, you can't do it. Because the average time is 3 to 10 years. 2 co-ops in our region who are amazing, including Dorchester Food Co-op pictured here, who know how to dress for a parade. They took 10 years, and their co-op is going to be freaking awesome. And they're going to open at the end of the month, this month or next month. And that national average is about 5 to 6 years. So that's a substantial amount of time and to put into it, right? And I put an X, I don't really know the least amount of money you can spend on a food co-op. But it's hard, co-ops are usually multiple $million projects, and the cost of opening food co-ops has increased a lot during the pandemic because of labor costs, resource costs, et cetera. And then you usually, most food co-ops, you need 1,000 founding member owners to join. So that's a lot of community organizing, a lot of effort. And so, right, everything we talked about, you want it. And so how are you going to actually do it? And now I want to turn it over to Johan to give you some examples of what does this look like? What does it look like and when you're organizing a food co-op to meet, or a co-op in your community to meet an unmet need?
Thank you, Bonnie. Appreciate everyone. Don't forget to keep dropping any questions or comments. If we see them, we'll try to engage them on the way. What happens once you decide a co-op is a cool thing, or I want to solve this problem in my community, and it's time to get started, right? I've been to many beautiful food co-ops across the country. They just have a different vibe. But not all of us are going to be arriving at that place or starting from the place that those folks started from. And during my time this past couple of years supporting Black farmers throughout New York State, some immigrants, some, Black indigenous, some regular people who are in disinvested communities, whether those communities were disinvested in because of racial, economic exclusion, extraction, or otherwise, right? They're in disinvested communities and they have to figure it out, right? And so I want to share a few stories. So one is all the way to the left, Big Dream Farm. That's Kama, right? Good friend of mine in New York. And he's a West African immigrant. I'm a Caribbean immigrant. We got along fine. And he's representing a community of over 50 families, 50 West African immigrant families, different countries, right? Mali, Ghana, all types of different countries. And that community of people recognized that they didn't have access to the type of food they were used to in their homelands, right? Different families, different communities. How do we deal with that, right? And so these guys didn't set off on a 10-year journey to own a grocery store. What they did was found a plot of land that they can all grow, take turns. Family gets on a schedule, make the trip upstate and help to cultivate the land so that they all have access to that food, right? They're buying it from themselves, taking their own time to work on the land, maybe hiring a hand or two here or there, right? So are they a co-op, right? We've got the problem, right? Limited access to culturally relevant foods. We've got the community, these West African farmers and the families that are part of this initiative. And we've got the enterprise. They had to create a company to rent that land and to exchange value between themselves, right? Are they a co-op, right? Next up, we've got another friend of mine, that's Ashanti, part of the Backyard Farm Collective. And this is a group of people who wanted to farm, right? It wasn't that they were looking for food. They were looking to escape the concrete jungles of New York City, right? Where they'd been engaged in urban gardening or learning to be on the land in different ways. And they're trying to re-engage their relationship with the land, right? These are Black people who are trying to be back on the land, right? Dispel these centuries of this mythology about their place on the land and really reclaim that, right? So they want to be farmers. And they realize, I don't want to farm alone, right? So these are people trying to find community to engage in this work, right? To reclaim their place in the land and not be alone, right? Are they a co-op, right? We know what the problem is. I want to farm, but I don't want to be alone. Who's a community, right? Other Black farmers who might be experiencing this, right? They have to learn to farm from other established farmers who can't relate to their stories, right? How do we learn together and create a safe space for each other? And then they created a company to try to engage this, right? And so they started with 5 and members came in and out and they're trying to figure it out, right? Are they a co-op, right? And I can talk about a group to the right, this last group I'll share. True Foods Preservation Collective, right? So another group in New York, and these guys, they were looking at the farm and food system, right? They saw all this waste, right? And these are gardeners, stewards, survival skills people, and they're thinking, how do we actually engage this food system? Because we believe we can harvest all this food waste and feed our people. We can teach them traditional survival skills that allow them to partner with farmers to harvest that food waste, and we can have a better, more liberated life on the land, right? So these are guys trying to reimagine the food system, right? I'm a gardener, you're a steward, whatever the case is, right? They know what the problem is. They recognize the community that could be born to do this work, and they had to create a company. And guess what? Neither of these guys knew about co-ops in the sense that we're trying to discuss it today, or that you might hear about it, right? These are folks who just engaged in the work. And when I met them, said, well, if you consider this business form called the cooperative enterprise, right? Because you're already doing it, right? Have you considered that? And they encountered business advisors, institutions who would say, no, I don't know what you're doing, right? So there's a bigger question of why didn't I learn about co-ops? It's another story. But ultimately, you can think about, what are these people doing? They're solving a personal problem in community, and they have to create some type of vehicle to do so, to hold that value, right? And so that's a lot of what I think about when I ask, what is a co-op? What are you trying to do? And how can a co-op be relevant to you? And so 3 more things I'll point out. The first is language. Not everyone who's doing a co-op know or is exposed to the language that we might use when we describe co-ops, right? They're engaged in the character and the practice of cooperation. How do we share power? How do we share and define roles and so on? But they're not aware necessarily that there's a business form called the cooperative enterprise, right? And they're not attaching co-ops to their name because the communities that they grew up in perhaps didn't have co-ops in their name, right? They didn't see that every day, right? But they were cooperating in many other ways. And so when it comes to some of these emerging communities, you're going to see collective, right? Now, is a collective from a co-op? Well, again, what is a co-op? Do they have that problem? Do they have that community? Do they have an enterprise organization that's going to hold that value and allow them to share power? And so collective, that's one terminology that you'll see, right? And are they a co-op? Yeah, we can discuss more. Another thing would be assets, right? If you don't have a lot of, if you live in a community that's been disinvested, you probably haven't had the opportunity to accumulate a lot of assets to personally invest in an enterprise to get off the ground, right? So Big Dream Farm, they had to pool their money, community of immigrants. I'm an immigrant, I know exactly what this feels like, to get a lease, right? And to just work slowly and surely. They had to use themselves as labor to build it, right? Similarly for Backyard Farm, right? They didn't have access to the resources to go and get a lease on land or to buy a piece of land for themselves. And the ecosystem wasn't even prepared for them, right? What's the real estate agent I go to get me a land upstate, right? No clue, right? All of these things weren't prepared for them. So they had to be a part of other things and figure that out, right? So assets are really important when it comes to engaging in cooperative enterprise, because you're taking that responsibility onto yourself. So you have to have something to give. One of the coolest things about co-op is that you recognize the value of things that are more than money, right? Of effort, of input, of money. All of these things have a value. And no matter what your contribution is, we all have a say, right? So that's a powerful thing that allows us to really engage this work, no matter how many assets or how much access to assets we have. Another thing is basically what I mentioned before, the distinction between the character of cooperation and the form it can take, right? You can have that character embodied all throughout the organization. In shallow pools of cooperation, we have our customers tell us what's the flavor of the week, or deeper pools, right? We have a shared identity and we have to concert with each other to make those decisions, right? So shallow pools, deep pools, the character. And you can have a nonprofit organization that's organized with that character, and you can have a for-profit organization organized with that character. But then there's the form. The cooperative form actually exists as a form you can create a business in and be recognized by the state. And that form gives access to certain benefits, right? Tax treatments and so on. So there's a character and there's a form. And if we think it's just the form, we're going to be sadly mistaken, right? You're going to see organizations with that incorporation that really don't hold up the character, right? And you may see groups with the character who may not even be aware of the form, right? Are they a co-op? So let's keep working. So the next thing that I want to share with you guys, I could find it, there we go. Actually, I'm not sure that's it. Would be just laying all of these different forms on a map, right? We've got democracy over here, I've got ownership over here, right? We've got the ability to give you input, democracy, share power, give our time and energy, and then we've got the ability to own, not just on paper, but in principle, right? To take full responsibility for how something turns out. And so you can see a variety of enterprise types spread across this map. Are they co-ops, right? We've got ESOPs, employee stock ownership plan, right? You get a piece of the company upon retirement, right? Some people might do so, or is that a co-op, right? In the co-op movement, the rest of that, they're not co-ops. But, you know, they're over there on that ownership side. And you've got folks on the top end over in democracy, you know, democratic nonprofits, right? You have a community board, they vote. That's how decisions are made. There's no owner, right? So no surplus or profit can be returned to individuals, but there's a democratic state in this organization. And then you've got the three types of co-ops that we might be all familiar with: housing, consumer, worker, right? There's other variations, but you might see those quite often. And so they're really trying to bring in democratic ownership to bring those two principles together. And so though there might be a variety of enterprise types, they can embody the cooperative character as much as they want to or need to, right? And they can rely on ownership models as much as they want to or need to. So what is a co-op? Are these guys co-oping? Next, I'll talk about what I think are the three basic elements. And this is a tool that we created at like a co-op fest to help regular people think about what they're doing in terms of a cooperative solution. And so the first thing you're thinking about is the idea, right? The idea comes from the problem, right? What is that personal problem that we're dealing with, right? What's the unmet desire or need in our community, right? Do we not have access to healthy, affordable food? Do we not have access to transportation and childcare? Do we not have access to to a job that really pays us enough to afford the lives that we need to live, right? A cooperative is a member-owned business. That's how I try to describe it simply. And the members could be individuals who need to own their housing, right? We've been renting, we've been displaced, rent costs are going up. Can we create a company that owns a piece of real estate and we become members of it, right? Or a housing co-op, member-owned business. Members could be cooks who are sick of getting exploited, right? Maybe they're immigrants working in the kitchen, getting underpaid, getting overworked. Could we own our own business as workers, right? All of us cooks, we're now a cooperative, right? Worker-owned cooperative, right? Or it could be a community. 1,000 of us don't have access to the food that we want culturally or otherwise, right? And we can own an entity together, and we're a consumer co-op. So a member-owned business where the members could be any group of people dealing with a shared problem. That problem is where we start, right? What is the right problem? Have we framed it? For a long time, we saw issues around the food system, especially in emerging communities, framed as food deserts, right? That problem entails a solution, right? It's a desert. How are we going to grow in the desert? We need to bring somebody else in who knows how to grow food, right? A supermarket or something, as opposed to food apartheid, where there's an intentional decision not to make an investment to provide food in the community. So framing that problem reflects the possible purpose and solution of the enterprise. It's very important that that framing is self-determined, the personal problem. It's not a charitable issue. It is a personal problem. Charity is awesome, right? It's impersonal love. It's love for people we've never met. Within a cooperative solution, we're trying to love ourselves, right? So what is the problem and how does it entail a solution? That's A and B. Then you've got C and D. We're thinking about that community of people who share this problem, right? That community of people determine the members, right? What type of people are we and how will we participate, right? So that's the membership piece. Who are the people in this community that's going to be a part of this? What are their roles and responsibilities? That's C and D. So we've got problem, and then we've got the members of the organization. And then thirdly would be those bottom two, E and F, right? We're talking about what's outside of the cooperative that's needed for success. Financing, marketing, accounting, technical assistance, right? That's the ecosystem, as well as what assets so we need to get this thing done. So those three things, right? A and B as a problem solution combo, C and D as a membership issue, governance, and E and F as thinking about the ecosystem. So, right, so that's how I like to keep this three simple basic things. Let's keep rocking. That reflects this paradigm that I'm putting forth, just bringing something in from my company, my consulting perspective. You're always trying to do these three things. Number one, again, is that idea, right? Does the idea work? Will it be profitable or would it generate economic value beyond our cost, right? So that means we know who our customers are, we understand what values they can expect, and we're able to provide that value over time, right? That's going to produce a company that operates well. And the profitability or the idea or the enterprise aspect there is about that innovation, which means creative problem solving. How are we going to creatively redirect resources from areas that are not productive in the company to areas that are more productive? And how are we going to keep doing so over time? So that takes an entrepreneurial or ownership mindset that is needed to have a successful enterprise no matter what, right? Especially you're thinking about a food co-op or something. What are the ways that we can save money, reduce expenses, or improve value for the people we're serving, right? That's the idea, right? The bottom left. The right, we're thinking about that community. A community becomes an organization once there's defined roles and responsibility. Before, everyone's welcome, everyone's loved, everyone's needed, but in an organization, everyone's not loved and needed. There are roles that we need to perform. And to keep that sustainable, we need the governance. Just to keep the idea sustainable, we need so-called profit or surplus. To keep the community sustainable as it becomes an organization, we need governance, right? What are the roles, responsibilities, and the rights? And at the top is the strategy. That's choosing the enterprise form that's going to be responsive to that environment in ways that allow us to get value, right? If we know we have a big systemic issue, right? We want to work together to solve this problem. It might be a nonprofit because we have people who can't pay for the service that we need to get funds from, right? Versus if it's a grocery store where we know the people are paying for the service or benefiting from it, we can create a cooperative enterprise, right? Or for-profit business. So you think about how we're interacting with the environment to drive the enterprise forward. So kind of top level, but this is how I try to think of this problem. I try to help people see, we've got an idea, it doesn't make sense. Is it going to be sustainable in the term that it creates profitability or surplus? We've got a community, how do we turn that to an organization, governance? And we've got an environment, what's going on in that environment? And how do we create an enterprise form that responds to that? Okay, let's keep rocking. So this is a tool that you can use to dive into the community aspect, the governance, right? It's called ownership model canvas. It lays out the stakeholders, meaning who has a stake in the future of this thing, who's affected by it. So these are the members as well as non-members, right? What benefits can they expect? What are their responsibilities? And then the two key rights, governance, decision-making. What can we do, what can't we do, right? Governance. Financial rights, what financial value do we get? How do we have financial contributions, and how do we understand what's going on financially with the organization, right? So this is allowing you to think very clearly about the community part. How do you create governance? How do you make the community aspect of your work sustainable, right? Not going to go too deep into this, but very good tool to think about that as you're getting started. The other side, you've got the business model canvas, right? This is really thinking about the business itself. Who are our customer segments in the far right? What benefits can they expect? What is our relationship with them? What's the key activities we have to do to provide the service or product? And what's the cost structure and revenue streams below, right? So it's looking at making the product, selling the product, and counting the money. That's what every business has to do, no matter what the business is. Someone's got to make it, the product or service. Someone's got to sell it, market it to the right customers, and someone's got to count the money, right? Bookkeepers and so on. So you have to think about both of those two things, the community aspect and the enterprise aspect. Those are the engines. And the sustainability comes in with profitability for the enterprise and governance for the community. That is going to create intergenerational value. It's going to allow you to keep this thing going, even when Johan is tired, even when Bonnie has a baby, right? We have things to do and we have to keep it going. So two tools that I think are helpful to think about those two elements. An ecosystem is a much broader consideration. So you think you can co-op, right? And I'm just bringing it home with those three questions I'm asking. Is there a self-defined problem, right? Personal to you, defined by you or that group? Is it shared by a community of people? It's potential members, right? Who can take on responsibility, the rewards, and power, right? Decision-making. If you have those things, you can co-op. So get started, all right? Get started, because nothing's stopping you. The language, you might not have it. The assets, you might not have it. And you might not have the frameworks to really define governance and all these things. We have each other, right? We have a problem, we're sharing in the problem, and we're willing to take responsibility for the problem. So quick advice, find the right problem, right? Make sure you frame it according to your own understanding, not an imposed problem, not a already academically defined. You use those sources, but how does it come alive for us, right? You might think we need money, but actually we need counseling, right? Because we don't get a lot. What is the problem? Start with community. Don't necessarily build it and expect them to come. Once you have a problem, see if anyone else has that problem and try to engage the problem in the context of community. And then finally, grow the people in that community to take on the roles necessary, right? Grow and organize your people for power. So that's all I have to say on that. And we'll generally turn it over to questions and possibly judgments of some of these ideas.
Johan, he put that additional slide in, and that's my favorite slide of the whole thing, right? I mean, that is kind of the epitome. It's like you grow and organize your people for power. That's what a co-op is. I think my 5-year-old would understand that. And then add in the chocolate milk example. That was good, right?
Absolutely.
I see the chat. The chat's pretty quiet. Does anyone want to ask questions, discussion? Did this provoke anything for you? Did it make you question? We want to hear from you.
Yeah, I've got a question. So I really appreciate what you've presented. And one of the things that sort of come up for me is in trying to define what is the unmet community need. Because in a lot of these cases where there's a co-op getting established, it might be simply a worker-owned coffee shop. And it's not like necessarily the community needs more coffee shops. So there, I think it's obviously about, the worker ownership piece of it. But I'm somebody who would like to see co-ops take over the country, if not the world. And so I can see them playing a role and a value in any industry at all. And so I guess I'm just sort of asking, when you think through that unmet community need, what are some of the more broad ways in which you think about that?
Want to start, Johan?
Yeah. So you definitely have to ask what's happening. That's number one, right? What am I trying to do? And what's happening, right? What's stopping me from it? You ask why. Why am I not able to access what I need, or whatever the case is, right? And you can keep unearthing and excavating by asking why, right? We need food. Okay, why can't we have food? There's no grocery store. Why is there's no grocery stores? Grocery stores invest because of margin and making sure the market is going to be sustainable for it. Why is this unsustainable? How do you dig deep enough into people's experience to understand what's really happening with the system they're trying to interact with? So that's, the first very broad thing you should do. Ask what's happening and why. And if people could talk about it, even if there's not a well-defined academic framing for this problem, they'll be able to come up with the language once they understand, oh, that happened to me and I didn't really know why, right? And that language will be co-created. And I've seen it happen over and over again. It's just what happens. Even if you don't have a language to define a problem, sit with people who've been affected by that thing that's happening. And you best believe they'll come up with some language, right? And you'll grow over time.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that gets back to that community organizing piece where the first year of project management for the food co-op, I sat in coffee shops with hundreds of people and asked them and talked to them and heard what they had to say. And some of them, it was all about their health. It was about the health of their grandkids who had food allergies. For some of them, it was about taking back control and power, where control and power had been taken from them. For some of them, it was about food. I like bougie goat cheese. Give it to me, right? So it's like you're going to find the more you go out there and talk and reflect, the more the community is going to reflect back to you, or they're going to say your vision is falling flat. I'm not going to join your co-op, right? And when we talk about that, how long is it going to take to organize? Even if you pull a miracle off and open in 3 years, your vision is going to change because the needs of your community will change. Or you're going to be involving more and more stakeholders. Johan had that question about like, who is the stakeholders? You got your members, but there's other stakeholders. And the more people you talk to, the more needs you're going to hear. And so usually the co-op, we didn't talk about vision, right? But usually your co-op starts with a mission and a vision, purpose, values you can throw against the wall. And when you actually have conversations with people, they're going to reflect back and say, you're forgetting about jobs. You're not talking about jobs. All I care about are the jobs. I want people, young people, to have an opportunity to work and not leave our community for the bigger city, right? So I think just getting out there and talking and having the conversations, one-on-ones, if you haven't done one-on-ones, look up relational organizing one-on-ones, 20-minute conversations where you listen. You talk for 1 second, you buy someone a coffee, and then you listen, right? And then you're going to hear, or you ask, like Johan said, and you're going to hear as well. That was a great question, Roderick. Thanks. What else? I know we got a couple. I forget JQ's going to leap in at the end. But anyone else have something that they want to add or ask?
I'm behaving myself. I'm letting see if anyone else is going to jump in because I've got a question.
Do it.
Right. I'm going to ask mine, which is, I think a lot of people, when they reach out, they said, look, we think we might want a food co-op. And a lot of times what they're people are coming to us with the problem they want to solve, which is we need food access and we need economic control. And I think that there's a lot of, but why co-op? Why do the co-op model? It sounds, as they learn a little more about, like, this sounds really complicated. This sounds really challenging. And, you know, I've got my own answers for that, but I think it's a really pressing question for communities that, you know, need access now, have economic, or, you know, are trying to reverse economic fortunes that were forced upon them now. What would be, how would you discuss that with folks about why choose the cooperative model? What would be your response to that?
I'll go first, Frank. I usually approach it agnostically. I mean, obviously, if someone's coming to my portal through the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, I have a sense they might be interested in co-ops. But generally, I'd like to start with the fact that you can approach your problem in whatever ways you have access to. And let's just start from there. I feel like with the co-op, you have to go through a litmus test of, you know, does anybody want a return more than to benefit the members personally? Does anybody want more control? Or is there a group of people that want more control? You might not be too suited for the co-op model, you dig? And so I'll approach it like that. I'll say, first, there's no one way to solve a problem, and then get to the litmus test. All right, we've identified a problem. Some of you guys want to work together. Let's run through these questions and ask, you know, is there anyone wants too much control? Anyone wants too much financial return? They might not be the proper model for that.
Yeah, I think it really is curiosity and asking those questions. And I liked the framework, Johan, you laid out of the steps, kind of to ask yourself those questions. We had an awesome co-op organizer in the Northeast, Kinga, who asked these questions to her board. It's like the reality check moment of, like, who are we really? Are we doing these things, right? Kind of going through the litmus test and then hearing back. You might be changing, you might be having different ideas and different thoughts about that, but asking those questions, who are the stakeholders we're serving, and then actually talking to those stakeholders, right? Talking to the farmers. You could be having an idea that is not grounded in the need of your community. And maybe you're what is that, kind of a, I don't want to use the word incestuous, but I'm going to. Incestuous think tank, where you're just kind of like tossing, you know, keeping the ideas in a closed loop, and you're separated from the community, right? So the character that Johan mentioned, it's like you can be so focused on the technical details of opening a grocery store and obsessed about what color the paint is going to be on your wall, which I started out. I wanted purple paint, right? Like, I was thinking about that. And then you just unlearn all these things and you're like, it's never about me, it's about us. And so if you're able to hold space for community and able to hold space for collective, you're on the right path.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. And I'm going to cut in here because, you know me, we're going to end this session on time. And I want to make sure that we take a moment to really thank Bonnie and Johan for coming out and talking with us. This has been a phenomenal conversation. So appreciation to both of you for sharing your time and your wisdom and your knowledge with us. For those who know, there's more coming in the sessions, and we have later today, we're going to be with Patrice Lockhart-Anthony of Black Label Consulting and Coaching, Hard Truths and Difficult Paths, talking about racial equity and being anti-racist within organizing your food cooperative. This session is particularly aimed at white food cooperators, although others are definitely welcome. And we'll be having that conversation tonight. I hope you'll join us. And then tomorrow we're going really into governance and details, policy governance power. Joel Kapishke of Seven Roots will be with us talking about what the heck is this thing, policy governance. We keep everyone talk about in how we run our cooperatives. Startup food co-ops don't usually run into it right away. It's something you have to kind of learn. He's going to talk about the tool, this form of governance, what it is, and how you can use it as a startup in a way that is useful to you, not just academic. And then systems and document repositories might not sound like a sexy topic, but this is one you guys requested. You're just talking with board members who have from Chicago Market, Grant and Matthew, who have successfully figured out organizing all of those documents and all of that information that the board has to share and utilize and be legally responsible for to get their food co-op where they want it to go. And it's a lot of work, and they're going to bring to you some ideas, some concepts, and some ways to manage some of that. So hopefully that will really help. And we want to, once again, just big thank you to our sponsors that have made today possible, especially National Co-op Grocers and all these other wonderful organizations, including Cooperative Fund of Northeast, I'll get it, of the Northeast, who has sponsored this series. Thank you all so much again for joining us, and we're gonna